Welcome, Wise Chat. Producer Henry here saying thanks for joining us this Wednesday for Wisecrack Live. A lot of fun seeing y'all yesterday. We'll be with you in just a moment. We're going to be starting a little early today. Don't forget to look that stum. We'll be right back. Hey, Lexa. Hey, Sean. 69 DJ, cool name. Nice to see you, MK. David. John is here as well. Yes, luck the struck, lick the stick, like the stream. It's Wisecrack Live, and we're going to have some fun on this Wednesday. I know we were absent on Mondays. Hopefully the Tuesday stream alleviated any symptoms holding over from that. Oh, Lexa, I'm in Texas right now, but there's like a weird hurricane system coming through. It's been very weird, extremely hot, then extremely humid. What up, John?
Hey guys, what up to all the early folks who are here? This is Wisecrack Live on Wednesday, August 7th. We're just kind of hanging out early, starting a little bit early today. We're gonna get you up to your 3 hours of collective Wisecrack streaming this week. We did a extra long stream yesterday. We're gonna do a slightly shorter one today, but it'll all balance out. We'll be back to our regular schedule next week. But we love to see the early gang here. Definitely like the stream if you haven't already. A big reveal that happened thus far is that Henry's in Texas. That is actually canon.
The plot thickens.
The plot is getting THICC. So there you go. We got a lot to talk about today. As we do every day. If you weren't here with us yesterday, we had a special case of a Mondays on a Tuesday stream. We had to talk about the Walls news. I will say, since talking about Tim Walls yesterday with you all, I have only found more and more stuff that I like about him, to be honest. I think that there is there's a slightly, how do I want to phrase this? There's a not illegitimate tendency for people who maybe identify as particularly progressive or left-wing politically to react to something like this with a heavy dose of skepticism, in kind of saying like, oh, it's just another American politics guy. But I think the whole point here for many of us is that we realistically have no serious expectation that, the Democrats are going to form a revolutionary junta and overthrow the American government. And I think for many folks, they maybe have a mental bifurcation between, electoral politics in America and on the ground organizing. And don't worry, as soon as we hit 10, I'll stop talking politics. This is just for the early heads. And I think there's a way to distinguish the electoral politics being a space where our best hope is to make things a little less bad. And by making things a little less bad, it opens up the space for more organizing and activity. Because I'll tell you this, it creates a lot more space and possibility to do local organizing if you aren't racked in debt, if you're able to access healthcare, if the police is slightly less militarized, if you're able to take sick time off work, all the sort of basic stuff that I know isn't in some cases like the exciting stuff, but that can create slightly better material conditions for doing something different. So I think, if one wants to really do a materialist analysis, I think for me at least, there's an advantage of looking at American electoral politics through a not through really like an ideological lens, but more through a materialist lens. And when I look at things through that materialist lens, I'm just kind of like, okay, if student loans are taken care of in a way that's at least manageable, if paid family leave and child tax credits and things like that are there, if there's funding for schools, there's this basic stuff where I'm like, that would make my life more immediately tenable, which would make it more possible for me to participate in, to various extents, other types of political organizing. So I think that's, if anyone is like the ultra leftist type who is skeptical or annoyed that you see some of your friends getting walls pilled, I think that's what's going on. Any thoughts to add to that before we really get into it, Henry?
Yeah, so I saw the news this morning that he doesn't have any like stock investment portfolio stuff, or he's
My
not
guy.
really invested in, the stock market that way, which is really cool. And I mean, I'm skeptical of my own enthusiasm towards him, but I mean, the only thing I've
Mm-hmm.
been skeptical about so far is kind of the personal narrativizing, like, Walls is my dad, I lost to Fox News thing. And like, I understand the feeling of like, oh, this is a paternal kind of white guy I can jive with as compared to like the toxic one I know. I just think that kind of approach is a bit of like a personal political narrative thing that's a holdover of like the sort of 2016 neoliberal ethos. And I mean, I don't like that sort of enthusiasm, but I don't think that's necessarily about Walls himself or the electoral process. It's more about like reimagining our politics beyond like these sort of like protagonist narratives of ourselves.
I just noted that Alexa commented on the wine glass back there. Um, I do enjoy a glass of wine, Alexa. I think in particular, um, I like a light French red. I'm not a. I like wine that I would consider, and I mean this in a positive way, like the Miller Lite of wine. I just want like a nice light red wine. And I know that's why you guys are here. This is Wisecrack Live. No, I'm kidding. So, but good to see everyone here. Nice to have a little bit of light politics chat at the beginning. And I think in general, like, let's let people feel good for a sec because it'll get bad soon. It'll get
Right.
bad soon. Uh, and maybe don't yuck other people's yum just yet. But I get it because I've yucked a lot of yum in my life. I yucked a lot of yum when I was younger. So, I'm not going to judge people's skepticism about this stuff. So, a few things before we really get cooking is always, if anyone has longer thoughts, questions, things they want us to get into, or if you want advice on anything, and if you ask for advice, we'll give you our takes, the chat can give their takes. Please do hit us up at wisecracklive666@gmail.com. If you're not following us on social media, just remember we're, at Wisecrack on Twitter. I'm at Michael O. Burns. Henry, what's yours? Is it just your full name?
It's at Hisbel Beatty. No,
Oh,
my full
never
name would
see.
be very long, so I don't
Yeah.
have that there.
So yeah, but you can find Henry's tagged in a lot of the post on Wisecrack. So check that out if you want. We appreciate it if you do. Yes, and don't duck dumbs. So check that stuff out. The Patreon is there. I'm working on a fun thing with our stream partner, Yes Please, to have a monthly coffee giveaway. So that is, wait, where did I go? Okay, so that's in the works. I'm letting you all know. We haven't figured out the specifics yet, but we're gonna do some sort of monthly giveaway where, whether it's a dumb trivia thing or you have to write some little submission or whatever, but someone is going to get a free month of a Yes Please coffee subscription. And I think it means you'll get like multiple bags of coffee for free. So keep your eye out for that, because I would love to give you guys some free coffee. Um, And we'll talk about it later, but we won't do the full thing now. But obviously, our stream partner is Yes Please Coffee. If you are a coffee drinker, check it out. And I got some other fun stuff coming down the pike for you. Yeah, there's some like race riots in the UK. It's not good. Mellow Jello, officially Lord of the chat. Steven, take care of the blue balls. Just turn us off during it. I don't want to be involved in your pleasure sesh. Finish your pleasure sesh. And then after you have your refractory period and your mental psychology goes from pre-orgasmic bliss back to post-orgasmic nihilist abyss, come back and hang out with us. This is more of a refractory period stream. We are not a pre-orgasmic stream where we would kill that vibe. But shouts to the Lord of the Chat. As always, you can be the Lord of the Chat if you give some memberships to people. It's just a fun thing. That's all it is. It's just a fun thing to do. Party Tortoise is officially a real boy. Now, yeah, everyone, bend the knee to Mellow Jello. And Mellow Jello at this point, if you've been gifted a membership, you are a part of the Mellow Jello Kill Squad, which means that if Mellow Jello, during the duration of this free membership, asks you to, take care of someone for them, you are obliged to do so. So I know we probably should have gotten into that before. Noah asked about Nebula. So the way Nebula works, as far as I understand this, Noah, is it's like an invite-only thing, and Nebula invites creators onto their platform. I don't think, A, they've never reached out to us. B, the only interaction I've ever had with them is Dave Wiskus, who's the CEO of Nebula, was snarky to me on Twitter once and accused me of belittling our audience, which I think he just misunderstood what was happening. He seems like a very nice guy, but he he was wrong. And also we have a parent company, so I don't know how that would work as well. Let's see. Yeah, the riots were not in Wales or Scotland. So Yasha for sure. I think thus far. Let's see. Thus far, I think it's in Northern Ireland and England. We'll talk about it. Ant B says calling UK protest race riots and not Black Lives Matter is disingenuous. Both are just protest. I don't think it's protest when people burn down, attempt to burn down hotels that supposedly have asylum seekers in them. Now you could have a legitimate problem with, let's say, a Black Lives Matter oriented protest in which a empty business is burned down. You could say that you think that is bad, and I totally get that. I could see a very legitimate critique of that. I think that it would be much harder to equate the burning down of an empty CVS with the attempt to burn down a hotel full of human beings. That's different, to be honest. It's a different thing. Kitsune7 is an American living in England. Kitsune, however you want to say it. I've been you before. I lived in England for quite some time. I hope it's going well. I found it very weird to be an American living in England. I did it for a while. It was a weird adjustment at first. It's very uncanny because if you're an American in England, there's so many things that feel the same. The language is the same. A lot of cultural references are the same. Even a lot of the food chains and stuff you can get is the same. But then there's underlying social, behavioral things that are different, and it can be super disorienting. So have fun there. Lord Oberon, when you're here, you're on time. So there you go. Yeah, so, just talk. Yeah, Ann Porkin says human lives, property, and stuff. And Lexa, thank you so much for popping in with if you're here, you're on time, because that's one of our things. Yeah, Kitsune's right. It's like a parallel dimension. I think that a fun thing about living in the UK, if you're American, is finding the stuff that you get excited about. I miss some of the grocery stores there and some of the items you could get that I truly thought were better. There's a bunch of things I miss about England. We're going to talk about England today to some extent. So there you go. So let's talk about what we're going to get into today. This is Wisecrack Live. It's Wednesday, August 7th. I truly cannot believe we're well into August at this point. I'm Michael Burns, and I'm here with my buddy, producer Henry. I'm in California. He's in Texas. So if we lived inside the movie Civil War, we would still be on the same team.
Yeah, that's why we do this, right?
Yeah. Tim Burnell, I appreciate that. You're one of the good ones. If you ever need me to commit a crime for you, I'll at least consider it. But so we want to talk about what's going on in the UK, and I'll be honest with you, I'm a little bit behind on that, which is one of the reasons I wanted to talk about it. So, you know, today will be like just some of those. Oh, the Tesco meal deal is nuts. Today will be like, those streamers that learn things live in front of you. We're gonna enter that zone a little bit. We might get into some academic freedom stuff in Florida because Florida state universities now have a thing where they have to monitor courses for any material that could be considered like anti-Israel or anti-Semitic. But of course, it's one of those things where the definition of anti-Semitism is very broad in that context, meaning criticism of Israel. Is anti-Semitic. John Chu said, "Why had England moved to the right for the past decade?" Interestingly enough, we have a video coming out on this. So I don't know if you all follow a dude on YouTube. If you don't, very disingenuous, very mainstream media vibe. I don't think the mainstream media is saying that sort of. I mean, I'm really curious, Ampy, what you think is disingenuous, because the question you asked that I responded to was differentiating what's going on in the UK from what you described as Black Lives Matter protests, and I can't think of an instance of a protest that took place in America that was oriented around black issues or a BLM thing in which they tried to kill people. Go ahead, Henry. I mean to speak over you.
Oh no, you just you ducked out audio wise for me for a second, so I just was asking for clarification on
Oh no.
the YouTube
Um,
channel.
what I say, yeah. Whenever my audio cuts out, everyone know that I'm saying something brilliant. Yeah. So there's here. You know what I'll do? I'm gonna share it right now.
Yeah, it was very minor, but if you name dropped a channel, I did not hear it.
I did. I'm gonna look it up for y'all so I can share it. And I want you guys to, if you have a second, go subscribe to this channel, because I think if you're not aware of his work yet, you will dig it. I'm going to do the Henry thing where I share the link a bunch of times in a row, which I know is just good practice. So we have a video coming out that John Duncan is writing for the channel, which I'm really excited about. And what we're going to get into. But that's fair. Jackson makes a point. There were, I guess, race-oriented riots in Los Angeles that led to some loss of human life. That is completely true. I think that I think that was different than what Aunt B said, which is talking about Black Lives Matter, just to be fair. But yeah, John Duncan's working on a video for us. It's kind of on like neoliberalism and immigration. And they kind of get to the question about why the UK, the US, France, and other Western nations and democracies we think of as liberal have shifted right, and what's going on there. And of course, one of the interesting ideas at play is how even the liberal parties in many of those countries are still doing a right-leaning swing. So, but there you go. Let's start with some comments, and we're going to get cooking. So, thanks to producer Henry as always for pulling comments. Tell me which one's the first for you. Okay, so Jacko Porge in 884, and I'm assuming this is from Friday's video on tech messianism. We invented robots that paint and write so more of us can focus on cleaning toilets and doing laundry. That's a really good point. The whole mythos around automation and AI is that it will do the mundane tasks so that we are freed up to more fully realize our humanity. It seems like what is instead happening is we are trying to use AI technology and robots to do human tasks so that humans can become more like servant robots. So that's fun. Something I'm looking forward to in life. The next one's from Vebadagaloob, says, so Zuck can imagine a future, Mark Zuckerberg. So far that teleportation is possible, but it's still a society where you must go to the office. Tells you all you need to know about the man and his views on humanity. Yeah. I mean, it's one of those, it's always that interesting dichotomy where these people are like, the future of humanity is we're going to have teleportation, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. But also because of our real estate investment holdings, you need to come to the office. Trevor Hannon 5113 said, we love to mythologize the great man in every industry. That's why we credit Rockefeller and Edison and Jobs and Musk, but not the public interest in funding that helped them. That sort of thinking makes people want to believe that public regulation stifles innovation and leads to almost every innovation serving the good of those great men rather than your fellow men. Also, if I dropped out of an engineering college, can I still be a cultural cool guy? Yes, you are a cultural cool guy. But that's a great point, and I think it gets at the tendency across the board in the cultural mythos to prioritize individualism over societal conditions. And we were talking earlier, for those of you who were here in the early crew, like the stream if you're here, for those who were here early, we talked about how even if you are skeptical of electoral politics in America or wherever you live, there's something to be said for pragmatically bringing up material conditions. And you got to think about it this way. Like, if you have someone that achieves great things because of access to great public education, public investment in the arts and technologies, a social safety net to help them if they lose their job for a bit, access to healthcare, all these sorts of things, those are what create the conditions for the person to do the thing, you know? And we have to remember that there are places in the world today still that like publicly fund art and music and theater and all these sorts of things, meaning that there is a relationship between individual achievements in the arts and sciences and society and its structure. So I think it's a really, really good point. Limo said, the reason suburban conservatives feel threatened by progressive culture, despite being insulated from it, is explained by that insulation. To paraphrase Adorno and Horkheimer, the suburbs isn't just a place, it's a state of mind. Yeah, we talked about this last week. In terms of some of the people, I think I referenced Ben Shapiro and Matt Walshe, who work for the Daily Wiry, and how these are people who are terrified of trans people, they're terrified of black people, they're terrified of queer people, they're terrified of lefty, artsy freaks. But they live lives where they do not encounter any of these people. They all live in well-off, white, Christian, Nashville-based suburbs. And, I think this idea that suburbs isn't just a place that's a state of mind is important, because it's like they want to take that physical separation they've created and then make it a social and cultural separation so that everything is suburb. The suburbanization of the American mind or something. Boombox Studio, this is from yesterday's stream, said my favorite Minnesota thing is calling something difficult a bear. If you are from Minnesota or just the upper Midwest, let us know if that's a thing. I haven't really heard it, but I believe that it's true. Also, thanks to all the reminders of Minnesota cultural artifacts we left out yesterday. Someone brought up the Replacements and Husker Du as bands from there. Someone brought up Brother Ali as a rap artist from the area. So if anyone, we want to make sure we give proper shouts to all of the Minnesota artists out there, because it's a cool place. I mean, I'm worried now. Some of you know this, but they've done a few studies on what areas of North America, the United States in particular, are going to last in terms of climate change and things like that, if you believe in that stuff. And one of the areas that's set to really thrive is Duluth, Minnesota. So I'm saying this, and I really mean this, guys. We started this, I think we did this yesterday. Welcome to Michael's Conspiracy Corner. If you have the money to buy real estate in Duluth, Minnesota, do it. I'm not even kidding. If you're a younger person and you can afford to buy a house or just a piece of property in or near Duluth, near Lake Superior, in 20, 30 years, you're crushing it. The rest of us are burning to death, especially people like Henry and myself who are in the American Southwest. We're fucked. But up in Duluth, people are going to be crushing it. Party Tortoise, yes. Rhyme Sayers, amazing. I think that, Minneapolis has, I'm sure, but has had historically a really good hip hop scene. Yeah, if anyone wants to find some good property in Duluth on Zillow, drop them in the chat and we can look at them together.
Yeah.
Later on the stream. But who doesn't? Henry brought this up. Who doesn't own property? Our baby boy Tim Walz. Other things I learned about Tim Walz since yesterday's stream. Big Bob Seger fan, has publicly stated he thinks it's a travesty that Warren Zevon is not in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Photo evidence that he wore slip-on shoes with a Grateful Dead logo on them at a fundraising event with Amy Klobuchar. I've retweeted many of these things if you want to go see, the evidence over there. RD, I know. Can I be honest with the anarchy thing? People get so mad when we use that word. It's a reference to a Clash song, guys. Or is that the Clash or is that the Sex Pistols that does anarchy in the UK?
I thought it was the Sex Pistols.
Oh, it is. It is. Sorry, I just said the Clash because I like the Clash better than the Sex Pistols. That's all we're doing, guys. That is a straight up Sex Pistols reference. So there you go. But Walls he's out here, guys. He's really out here with the shits, as they say. Aunt B partied with Trampled by Turtles. That's so cool. Duluth is rad. When I didn't go to Werewolves of London is Sandhill Farmer. It's maybe his least interesting song, but it's also a fun song. Warren Zevon is great. If you haven't dug into the catalog of Warren Zevon, I recommend checking it out. So a thing that is happening in the world is from what we see in the media thus far, and we're going to learn about this together today, okay? So just note that. So before we really get cooking, let me formally now shout out our stream partner. Our stream partner these days is Yes Please Coffee. I've talked about them every stream we do. I'm a very big coffee person. I'm trying to think when I first got nerdy about coffee. It was probably when I was in like grad school, because it was a fun ritual to make like a nice cup of coffee. I remember I got a coffee mug I liked a lot, and it made me want to make better coffee. And then I moved to an apartment when I was in grad school where it just seemed more practical to have a little pour over thing rather than a full coffee maker. And then a friend recommended like a hand grinder to grind beans, and I was like, that's kind of exciting. And then a friend who I went to grad school with pointed out that there was a cool little shop in our town that sold really nice beans from all over the world. So I was like, that's a fun thing, like a fun hobby. So I kind of got into it that way. And then, of course, there was a wave, 10, 15 years ago of like cooler coffee shops opening. And I realized that there's some coffee that tastes very delicious, made me excited. So I've always been a person that likes and appreciates good coffee. And in particular, I like the way in which there are so many independently owned regional coffee roasters in America. And first and foremost, I encourage you, find someone in your town who's making good coffee, because it's a great way to support folks. And someone in LA who makes good coffee, and I'm embarrassed to show you, this bag's almost empty, is Yes Please Coffee. Now, Yes Please is a independent coffee roaster from Los Angeles, California. They put out new blends like all the time, like literally every week. They're putting out new stuff. I asked them, should I be hyping up certain things? And they're like, it's almost not worth it because we keep putting out new stuff. So if you go to their website, they have tons of options. You can get a single bag, you can get decaf, you can get espresso roast, you can get a subscription. I think the subscription is a good deal. If you drink coffee regularly, I recommend trying the subscription. But you can use the code Wisecrack and you're going to get 20% off. Now, they do not pay us to say this. I am the one who first reached out to them. We just get a truly tiny little kickback. That's like a rev share thing. So, maybe a couple bucks or something max. So, a way for us to clue you into a brand we're excited about, to use something that we all use and like a lot. So do check out Yes Please Coffee if you are a coffee person. I think they show the roast dates, but they roast. Carlos asked this. They're roasting every week. So when you order from Yes Please Coffee, they're not sending you some batch they roasted a month ago that you're getting now. They're a tiny company, and they only do direct to consumer stuff. So if you order a bag from them, whatever you're gonna get was just roasted. Correct me if I'm wrong on that, friends, but I'm almost 95% sure of that. So definitely check it out. Yeah, go ahead, Henry.
I have the site on screen, and they have like their previous roasts shown, so you can kind of see what they've been up to in the past.
Yeah. So if you're a coffee nerd, just dive in, and they put like cool stuff on their social media as well with more information. Want to check it out? They don't have tea; it's just coffee, but check it out. It's a company we're excited about. So there you go. I have some in my system right now, so if I seem particularly on top of things, we can say it's because of Yes, please, coffee. And a fun thing, if you're getting older, guys, last thing I'll say, and the caffeine's hitting you a bit too much, but you missed the ritual, get 1 bag of regular, 1 bag of decaf, and then have your morning coffee be the regular coffee, and then your afternoon be the decaf. The decaf still has a tiny bit of caffeine in it, and it kind of tricks your brain a little bit, and the ritual is going to give you a little boost. So check that out. But today, our first topic we're going to get into is what's been going on in the UK. And again, this is Wisecrack Live. I'm Michael Burns. I'm here with producer Henry. We do this every week. Please subscribe to the channel, like the stream, and set a reminder, even though, as Lexa pointed out earlier, even sometimes when you subscribe and click the bell, YouTube's like, nah, we're not going to show it to you. What are they up to? I don't know, but I'm afraid to criticize them. But there's been rioting in England and Northern Ireland. We'll watch a video first. I'll cue it up and then I will pause it.
Start this hour.
Hopefully BBC doesn't shut us down. I feel like they don't because it's a public thing. But we're going to watch a BBC thing. We might not get through the whole thing to give some context. And then we actually have an article from Wisecrack contributor and British philosopher Tom Wyman where he gives his perspective on it. So, you know, we are not British. I've lived there for a while, so I think I have a bit of a right to say some stuff. But you know, we're gonna check out that perspective and just get a sense of it. The real broad brushstroke overview before we dive in, though, is that there was a stabbing at a dance studio in the UK last week. A really horrible thing where a UK resident, UK national, went into a kids' dance studio, started stabbing people, hurt, I think, 11 people, killed a few people. Really horrible stuff. And if you don't have context for UK stuff, the UK is like, I don't mean this glibly, it's a stabby country. If you think of America as a shooty country, the UK is a stabby country. We don't really have mass stabbings in the US because people just use guns. Guns are not accessible in the same way in the UK. So sometimes when you do see a act of public violence or terror, it will often be a knife-based thing, which is horrible. I have a hot take on that I'm not going to share because my brain just told me, too much, Michael, too much. If you want to predict what my hot take was about the difference between stabbings and shootings, feel free to offer it. And if you're right, I'll probably snicker and say, someone got it. But let's watch this BBC footage. And if the guy talks slow, I'll probably put it at 1.25 because that's my new obsession.
UK, where there's been renewed rioting in some cities in England and Northern Ireland. The worst outbreaks of violence came in Belfast, Plymouth and Birmingham. Nearly 400 people have been arrested after a week of violent disorder, which began last week in Southport after the fatal stabbings of 3 girls and escalated following misinformation about the identity of the perpetrator spread on social media. Last night in Plymouth, at least 3 police officers were injured in what the police described as sustained violence. Bricks and fireworks were thrown at them. 6 arrests were made. In Belfast,
and to create some context as well, the first time I lived in the UK was starting in the summer of 2007. God, I'm old. And a thing about the UK, y'all might not know this, is there's a big contingent of English nationalists, and they're mostly old, pale, white dudes with shaved heads. Oh God, I just described myself. A little more portly than me, who like lager and football and hate immigrants. And they have things like the UK Defence League and the all these sort of like little groups and gangs. And one of the first things I did one of my first weekends living in the city of Nottingham was go to a counter protest when a bunch of English nationalists were marching through the streets, saying hateful things about immigrants. And I mean, honestly, like if I could be really blunt, they're just some of the most pathetic, grotesque people I've ever seen, blaming their inadequacies and misery on immigrants. And the irony, of course, is that England is a country that depends on immigration in a number of ways just to sustain economic life. But just so you know, like for the context, this isn't a new thing, and it's quite often that if a crime or an event happens, that they can sort of say, oh, an immigrant did it. It leads to stuff like this. So you know, great little island they got.
Riot officers had stones and petrol bombs thrown at them.
Petrol means gas.
Close to a supermarket which was set alight at the weekend. As the latest disorder unfolded, the Prime Minister criticised the owner of X, Elon Musk, who posted that civil war is inevitable in the UK. Our reporter.
How about this, guys? That we have a BBC story, and the BBC is generally pretty a flat affect news station. They're ideological, but less ideological than American news stations because they're publicly owned. How about Elon Musk getting involved? How about Elon Musk finding ways to use his pet platform to push the needle on events in a country that he is not a member of?
Aruna Iyengar has the latest.
Two opposing protests in Plymouth started out peacefully before vocal clashes between the anti-racism and anti-immigration groups. Police in riot gear were deployed to keep the groups apart.
I mean, when you look at the two groups, just like, so I paused it right here, like, look at the dudes on the left. Those are the anti-immigration guys, and, like, you'll get what I'm talking about. And then when they show the anti-fascism and racism groups, they're just, like, cool-looking weirdos who seem like you'd want to hang out with them in general.
And several...
It's just all dudes. Like, it's all just, like, the most troll-looking dudes in the world. And listen, I'm a fan of troll-looking dudes, but these are a particular type of troll-looking dudes.
Officers suffered injuries as violence later broke out.
It was.
They all look like British Alec Joneses, like
Kyle
they're trying to look. Yeah, for sure, Kyle Brittenhouse. My God. Moment of silence right there, because that was one of the best things I've ever heard. Can we give some love in the chat right now for Henry just dropping Kyle Brittenhouse? Just do whatever you need to do. We need the chat to blow up. Like the stream. Do whatever. Give some super chats. We need to celebrate that. If you're just tuning in, producer Henry just referred to the physical appearance of anti-immigration British protesters as Kyle Rittenhouse. I'm going to be thinking about that all day.
Yeah, considering recent Rittenhouse actions too, I'm wondering if J.K. Rowling's going to be on them.
Oh, for sure. I mean, J.K. Rowling's busy starting like fake anti-trans violence towards a female athlete in the Olympics because she didn't like how she looked. But that's a whole other thing.
Kind of terrifying. Hundreds of people moved up the Hoe Park onto the kind of the promenade and the memorial area. 10 minutes after that, there was a strong police presence kind of dissipating them after they'd set fires and things. And then there was a huge group of rioters outside our front door, kind of smashing things, organizing themselves for further mischief. And then 10 minutes after that,
Mischief is mischief.
Completely moved back down towards the town center area.
Look at this guy. Just looks like someone's angry dad getting arrested. His little shorts and his little butt crack pointing out.
There was also unrest in South Belfast. Last night, riot teams were deployed to Sandy Row as a petrol bomb and stones were thrown at police officers.
Stones are rocks.
In Birmingham, cars were smashed and a pub was damaged after protesters gathered following false rumours of a planned far-right demonstration. And a hate crime investigation is underway in Burnley after gravestones in the Muslim section of a cemetery were covered in white paint.
I'm going to say that's bad. I'm going to say regardless of your political affiliation, vandalizing people's gravestones is like not cool. You know, it's not good. I think we can all agree we don't like that.
Yeah, we also just passed 666.
Hey, baby girl sleeping upstairs. So we did it together. But excited about that. Thank you for doing that. I think we did it because of Henry's Kyle Brittenhouse remark.
I still think that there is a way to bring this to an end by people coming together as a community in the way that we've seen in the clean-up operations. Now, clearly that strength of community spirit is there, and that's what we call a...
Am I going to look like this guy? And like in 10 years, is this me? You know, it's a sort of like looking into my future. I won't talk like that, but that's basically, I think that's where I'm headed. 10 years, 15 years, who knows?
To bring this violence to an end.
Meanwhile, in Southport, the community is dealing with the horrors of last week and the disorder that's followed. The family of Leanne Lucas, who was stabbed while leading the children's dance class, have shared their disbelief at what's going on around the country.
Just go home. Just let us recover as the best we can. I know we're never going to recover, but at least give us a chance to.
Police say they're working around the clock to identify more people involved in the violent disorder, with more arrests expected in the coming days.
Note that it says mosques to be offered emergency security, because what's happening is that people are trying to attack and burn down mosques in the UK. That's not good. It's not good.
Aruna Iyengar, BBC News.
Well, let's go live to our political correspondent, Harry Farley, who
The green shirt is the
is
tough
at
one.
Westminster. So, Harry, more violence last night, and the Prime Minister has spoken about holding those responsible both on the street.
Okay, I think, what is this other video? I'm gonna load it and pause it immediately.
Days of
Oh, this is a longer one. Let's see. I guess we should not get into the longer video. Do we feel like we get a sense of this? Maybe should we watch a little bit of the other video, or
I'm curious to dive in just because I'm completely blind on this issue. But how's chat feeling? I think we should keep on subject a bit longer.
Yeah. Yeah, well, let's watch a little more, and let us know, guys. I think maybe we'll watch a little bit of the second video we have pulled up, and then we will look at Tom Wyman's article. So there you go. Let's see. So Zach says, why do so many balds? Can you say the word balds? Choose baseball hats. There's a world of hats out there. I mean, I do want to say one thing. Baseball hats are comfortable, they're widely available, and in a world of merch, most people who are making independent merch-based things use baseball caps. That's why I like them in particular. Now, I just got to say a thing. And you're going to think I'm lying when I say this. I've been a hat guy before I was bald. In fact, I'm going to tell you a story. Get ready for Michael's digression corner. I got a lot of corners now. I guess I'm allowed to have at least 4. I think 9th grade maybe. I was a shy, insecure, weird, nerdy kid in high school. I know it's going to shock you. You assumed I was homecoming king. But I went to a football game. First time I went to a football game. And I talked to a young lady there. And I started hanging out with her and her friend. And I felt like, I was like, Mikey, we're out. I didn't call myself Mikey then. It's like, we're out here. We're flirting. We're having fun. I was like, this is great. I'm in high school now. I'm talking to a girl. I think her name was Laura or Lauren. And then she was like, come talk to me in school. She might have giving me her locker number or something, which is crazy. And then went and talked to her in school the next week. So excited. I was like, your boy's out here. Your boy is the Don Juan of the high school. Tried to talk to the young lady and got a little bit, what do they say? They say curved? Is that what the kids say these days? Didn't go well. And then she had her friend come tell me, Laura liked you on Friday because you were wearing a hat, but she doesn't think you're cute when you don't have a hat on, is what I was told as an insecure.
Whoa.
14-year-old boy. Yeah. Yeah, guys. We all deal with things the way we deal with them. So
you're handing this story out for free on stream? This should
Yeah,
be
guys.
paywalled content.
There should just be
That is
a Netflix series.
Yeah, that is a foundational driver of just Wisecrack. Wow.
Yeah, so there you go. You guys got that one for free. I hope she's doing well though. I don't hope she's doing. I hope she's doing well physically, but I hope emotionally. I hope she married someone who sucks. I hope he's not a bad guy, but just who sucks, is boring, it isn't attentive, all those sorts of things. But shouts to her. If you're watching this, shouts to you. Okay, let's learn some more. This video is longer, so I might 1.25 it, but we'll see.
rioting in England and Belfast. Social media has been used by the far right to spread rumors about immigrants and organize protests that have become violent. Thousands
And let us know about volume and
of
stuff.
police officers are on alert. So, what's behind the surge in violence? This is Inside Story.
I'm going to be bold and try 1.25, guys. We'll see how it goes. Made the song better, at least.
Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Mohammed Jamjoom. Thousands of police officers are on high alert in the UK after rioting in cities and towns in England and in Belfast. The violence has been blamed by Prime Minister Keir Starmer on far-right activists and groups organizing themselves online. Individuals, rather than organizations, seem to have been driving the protests, almost all focused around migrants. Mosques have
Our video coming out on Friday is about political violence started by individuals, not a part of formal groups. Check it out.
also been targeted.
I just watched the cut today. It's looking pretty good. And Olivia and Lux kept in some particularly weird things that I said while filming. You'll love it.
Migration has been a leading topic in politics and media in the UK for several decades, with some newspapers and politicians carving out a hardline stance. The last Conservative government had planned to deport illegal migrants to Rwanda, a plan dropped by the new Labour one. So why has there been such a widespread and sudden upsurge in violence? And how have politics and media affected attitudes on migration? We'll be discussing this with our guests shortly, but first, this report from Victoria Gatenby.
Riots by far-right protesters have spread across the UK,
And note that there was already one big lad chugging a can of lager
sparked by a
during
series
this.
of murders in a seaside town in the northwest of England. 3 girls aged 6, 7 and 9 were stabbed to death in a knife attack at a children's dance class in Southport. Police arrested a 17-year-old boy who was born in Britain. But users on social media falsely claimed he was a Muslim asylum seeker. Newly elected
So basically the deal is like,
Okay, yeah, that clarified a lot for me.
yeah, so the horrific human being that did this, for lack of a better term, is a brown person. And when people found that out, they spread that he was an asylum seeker, which plays into these fears of migration. We see the same stuff happening, in the American right, where right-wing Americans will say that all the murders are happening because of migrants. So plays right into this fear of the other, fear of the immigrant, which is what sparked all this. But it was a dude who was born in the UK.
Reform MP Nigel Farage was criticised for speculating whether, in his words, the truth was being withheld by authorities.
He's a
A
bad
mosque
guy.
in Southport was attacked by a far-right mob.
Local communities are being thrown apart, and these people from outside are coming and literally destroying the mosque. And we've spoken to the imam from Southport. He said he had to barrage and lock himself inside the office with his other members who were in the mosque at the time. They were afraid the door was going to be broken down.
In the days that followed, the riots spread. In Hartlepool, in the northeast of England, a police car was set alight. And in
Just like, look at these guys.
London, crowds pelted the gates of Downing Street and fought with police officers. That prompted the Prime Minister to hold an emergency meeting with police chiefs.
As far as the far right is concerned, this is coordinated. This is deliberate. This is not a protest that has got out of hand. It is a group of individuals who are absolutely bent on violence.
But despite government warnings, disorder has persisted. In Nottingham, officers were confronted by far-right protesters.
Didn't I just tell you a story about how when I moved to Nottingham, I went to a counter protest because of far-right protesters? I'm glad they're still at it all those years later.
In Hull, a crowd demonstrated outside a hotel housing migrants, and disorder broke out in Belfast. Campaigners opposing racism were also out on the streets, saying those spreading hate and misinformation must be stopped.
We fought them in the 30s, we fought them in the 50s, we fought them in the 70s in Britain. We will not allow the right wing to dominate our...
Kind of fun that a trade union guy in the UK, I think the UK has more of a connection between, I'd say, progressive causes and labor than we do here in America, because in America we've systematically undermined labor for generations.
Working class communities, and we will come together every week in every town and bring the message of solidarity to all the people that have come to our communities.
Only a month after being elected, the new Labour government is facing a national crisis, and the Prime Minister and Home Secretary are having to focus on stopping violence across the streets of the United Kingdom. Victoria Gatenby, Al Jazeera for Inside Story.
And I do think there's not to psychoanalyze a group of people, but to literally psychoanalyze a group of people. There is and if anyone from the UK is in the chat, please, jump in on this, but there is a sort of underlying malaise, sadness, depression in the UK. There's 9 helicopters over my house right now. Maybe they're finally coming for me. And Mark Fisher has written about this. I know some of you have read Mark Fisher before. He's the author of Capitalist Realism. And he describes this malaise in the UK because not only is the weather always shit, it's a place that doesn't feel like there's a lot of opportunity. Feels like it's already hit its heyday. A lot of people don't feel like there's anything to do, anywhere to go. And I think that malaise leads to an underlying kind of depression and sometimes anger. There's a ton of alcohol abuse, a lot of drug abuse there is how people cope with it. But I think sometimes you see a certain type of depressed person who feels like there's nothing to do and nowhere to go just jump in on shit like this because it's easier to blame an imagined, migrant for your problems than to deal with the fact that you live in a country that has a government that's basically systematically destroyed your opportunity of anything, signaling a good or interesting life for a number of years. They're not rioting in Scotland, which is great. I love Scotland. Scotland's a great place. Yeah, someone said there is no British dream, and there's not.
Yeah, I can't think
Not.
of like an aspirational British narrative or like contemporary archetype of like British life in my head that's not.
Yeah. Well,
Uh,
the best version I've ever seen of British life in times I lived there is a version of England, or I'll say England in particular, that's a society that has robust public transport, funds education, has a strong social safety net, is funding the arts,
yeah.
and isn't a global superpower, but creates the conditions for people to have a decent life and creates the conditions for a lot of people to participate in what we would vaguely call a middle class existence. And I think the UK in recent history has gotten much closer to that than America ever has.
Yeah.
However, and this is a line that comes up in Tom's piece and Defector we'll look at in a bit, you know, Britain has Americanized itself in the last 20, 30, 40 years. You know, there was the unholy alliance of Thatcher and Reagan that still has ripple effects today. And one of the reasons I left to the UK, along with Love, was that universities in the UK, which historically I think were better than the average university in America, at least structurally and how they treated academics, started becoming Americanized. They started bringing in business consultants to retool how universities functioned and structured, and they evaluated universities on basis of profit and monetization and not education. You know, and that's that sort of like neoliberalization that we've seen, you know, work its way across everything in America, and that's happened in the UK. They privatized the National Rail Service. They're trying to privatize the National Health Service. They're taking all of these things that created, I'd say, like a high basement for what one's life could be like in terms of no matter what, you're able to get around efficiently, no matter what, you're able to, you know, get healthcare, no matter what, you're able to access education, and they're slowly dismantling those things. So when someone says there's no British dream, like what can you hope for? And that's why a lot of, you know, you meet a lot of British people, especially like upper class British people in other places because they're getting out. So, you know, I'm for Zach. And I hope too, if any, you know, for any UK homies here, again, like this is not me speaking as someone who's wholly external to it. That's just trying to be critical. Like I lived in the UK on and off for 10 years. I went to 2 different universities there. I taught there. Some of my best friends are there. I at one point had a resident card to the UK. I participated in the NHS. You know, coming from a place of, you know, if anything, I have like a soft spot for the UK. Like I came of age in the UK. I was a pretty awkward, weird person, and I moved there at 22, and it was the place in which I felt like I became an adult. So, you know, but we'll get back to it. But I think that's kind of, if we want to get into the psychology of what's happening in Britain, I do think that is part of it.
All right, let's go ahead and bring in our guests. Joining us from London is Shabna Begum, Chief Executive Officer of the Runnymede Trust, a British race equality and civil rights think tank. In Oxford, Katie Brown is a postdoctoral fellow at Maynooth University in Ireland. She focuses her research on mainstream far-right discourse. Also in London, Sohan D'Souza is a computational social scientist interested in the links between disinformation and political extremism.
It sounds like a sick panel.
Warm welcome to you all, and thanks so much for joining us today on Inside Story. Shabna, let me start with you today. All of these riots, all of this violence, this has all erupted so quickly. Why has there been such a widespread and relatively sudden upsurge in violence?
Well, I think, as you say, it has been an outbreak of violence, but I think it's unsurprising given the long lineage of anti-immigrants, Islamophobic demonisation that we've seen in our mainstream politics now for years, but particularly intensifying in the last few weeks and months since October 7th with Gaza and what's been happening there, and then with the general election campaign, both during and afterwards, the kind of narratives that we saw being espoused by our mainstream political parties.
And I hate to pause so early, but I do think it's worth noting as well, like all of these, you know, we talked about how there kind of is no more British dream. There is no more sort of traditionally flourishing like British life. And yet that's the thing that some of these rioters or protesters are trying to defend or keep. Like, you know, there's this narrative that the migrants are taking that away from you, not the politicians, not the business leaders. They're not trying to take it away from you. Like the migrants who largely work the jobs you don't want to work anyways are taking that from you. You know, this is a thing that it's not just Brits that think this way.
The trading in insults around Muslim communities has become quite normalised by our mainstream political parties. And so it's unsurprising when you see such a hostile environment created by our politicians that then erupts on our streets in the way it has done over the last few days.
Katie, I saw you reacting quite a bit to what Shabna was saying there. It looked like you wanted to jump in, so please go ahead.
Yeah, no, I think I'd just echo what Shabna was saying, really. We've witnessed with the election campaign and actually long predating that with Brexit as well, the normalisation of anti-immigration discourses, not just from the far right, but from those at the heart of the mainstream within the Tory party and the Labour Party as well. At these protests, there's been signs that say, "Stop the boats," and that's a direct quote from the previous Conservative government. And then you've got Labour coming in. Now, they did scrap the Rwanda policy, as you mentioned, but they did that.
The Rwanda policy, by the way, was the Conservative government in the UK was trying to ship migrants to new camps they built in Rwanda to make them live there. They were building these like prefab homes. It's one of those things that if you hadn't heard of it and you weren't aware of it and someone tells you, you're like, that's crazy. There's no way they did that.
How long ago was this? I'm completely in the dark on it.
That was happening until a few weeks ago when the Labour government took over. Yeah, I want to say, I'm pretty sure John Oliver did a segment on it a few months ago. And to shout him out again, I think we're going to talk about it in the video that John Duncan is working on for us.
Often kind of claiming that it was because the policy was ineffective. They weren't challenging the premise of it or the principle of it. And Home Secretary Yvette Cooper has said that the security of Britain's borders is her top priority as well. So we've seen a continuation of this violent rhetoric from the mainstream, and that's played a key role in emboldening these actors and creating the atmosphere that we're seeing in Britain at the moment.
Shabna, let me ask you to pick up on a point you were making and also a point that Katie was making just now. When it comes to this rhetoric that is demonizing of migrants and migration, when you hear top-tier politicians in the UK saying, stop the boats, or talking about invasions going on at the border, first of all, how different is that from what you were hearing from politicians just a decade ago? The fact that this is all being normalized, but also how much does that impact this kind of anti-migration sentiment throughout society?
Yeah, I think you're right to say that there has been a marked shift in our discourse, and that we have seen since in the last 14 years with the previous government a real escalation of that kind of hostile narrative, particularly kind of as it was created through the hostile environment policies. So we've seen a real activation and an escalation of some of those narratives, and that legitimizes that kind of demonization of migrants. But I think it's really important that we also note that it's not the violence that we've seen in the last few days hasn't been just directed toward migrants. It has been directed towards settled Muslim communities.
And, you know, and I think that's an important point there, that like there's these dominoes that start to fall where politicians are like, you know, the reason things are bad is because of those guys. And, you know, I'm not saying we should do anything, but we should probably stop the boats and ship them to Rwanda. I hear there's a hotel there. I watched a movie about it. It looked nice. Joaquin Phoenix was there. You know, we just say stuff like that. Then an event happens. It's a horrific event. And just to be clear, for anyone watching this, it's absolutely abhorrent. The stabbing that happened, it's absolutely, to use British parlance, it's like gutting to think about, you know, that loss of life. It's needless. And, you know, stabbings, mass shootings, all this stuff. It's a horrible part of contemporary society. And I hate that it's a part of contemporary society in the West. But, you know, then that happens and it absolutely sucks. But it's like one person who's horrible doing a horrible thing. And then it quickly tips from like, well, this one guy, well, he looks like them. So now we're mad at them being, you know, migrants. And then it's like, but you know what? You know what the migrants kind of look like? They kind of look like them. So let's get them as well. And you know what I notice about all these people? They're all not white. So maybe everyone who's not white. You know, there's like these like dominoes that start to fall, which get real fash very fast. I think that's kind of what they're describing here in this process. And this is all instructive because we see things like this happening all across the country. If you are just tuning in for any reason, you're tuning in because YouTube showed us the stream and you clicked it, and I appreciate you for being here. This is Wisecrack Live. Today we're kind of diving into what's going on in the UK currently, recent riots and race riots that have broken out there in the wake of a really horrible stabbing. If you're mad at the thumbnail, it's a reference to a Sex Pistols song. Sorry, I like puns and song references. Yesterday's theme or thumbnail said "From the Window to the Walls," which is a reference to a Lil Jon song, of course. Everyone get low. But I'm Michael Burns, I'm here with producer Henry, and we're currently watching a video with a panel of folks breaking this down. In a little bit, we're going to check out a Defector article that came out today from writer and philosopher Tom Wyman, someone who's contributed to Wisecrack before and someone we like very much. Follow Tom. His work is good. But let's get back into this for now. And thank you to the chat for keeping it funky.
And so that have been targeted, people of color, black and brown, who've been targeted by this violence. So, it's really important that we don't just kind of locate it as part of this anti-immigrant narrative. The anti-immigrant narrative has always been racialized, and we've seen that kind of spill out into the violence and the way that violence has targeted not just migrant communities, not just people seeking asylum in this country, but settled Muslim communities and black people from some of the videos that we've seen circulated on social media. So this is a highly racialized and acts of racist rioting that we're seeing on our streets.
So, Han, to kind of continue with the theme that Shabna was talking about there, misinformation around all this first spread online that the suspect in the murder of these girls was a Muslim immigrant. Then far-right groups falsely claimed the suspect was an asylum seeker. How much of a role has social media played in driving all of this?
I mean, it's interesting, too, that, we saw in the BBC thing we watched that there was the UK government had to get mad at Elon Musk because Elon Musk used his platform to imply that a civil war was coming because of this. And it is wild. I get spicy here sometimes thinking about whether it be streamers or posters or people on the internet that use their platforms to spread stuff, because there are consequences for these things. And I think we maybe need to be more critical of others and more critical of ourselves, because who among us, I'll say this, if you think in the past year you haven't fallen for any misinformation on the internet, let us know in the chat and tell us how you did it, because I know I have. I've fallen for stuff. It's so easy to do it these days, and especially the way that Twitter functions. And again, I'm not trying to act like old Twitter, which was still run by creepy Silicon Valley psychopaths, was perfect by any means. I think it had more built-in mechanisms to stop this sort of stuff. But oh boy, we built a hell of a system for ourselves. But let us know in the chat if you've never fallen for disinformation.
Fueling these riots, in having an impact when it comes to the violence that we're seeing.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It has played a huge role, I think. We can see it from the very beginning.
Sorry, I have to say one more thing. I'm so sorry. Someone's going to leave a comment that's like, I find this unwatchable because of all the stopping. I mean, imagine if after, was the dude Dylan Roof who shot up the black church in South Carolina and the cops took him to Burger King?
Yes.
I mean, imagine if after that happened or something similar, on the news, people were like, it turns out this guy's family are white Protestants. And then a bunch of people who weren't Christians or people of color went in the streets and surrounded Protestant churches and tried to burn them down. Like, that would be crazy, right? We think that's crazy, but it's the same thing structurally.
When these Potemkin news sites that basically do nothing but put out unverified or mostly unverified information, spread the fake name of this alleged asylum seeker person, and that began spreading around and basically directing what had already been building up for months in terms of anti-Muslim, anti-immigrant propaganda towards a specific event, focusing people's furies onto that. And yeah, that the incentives now are
just like when they show these riot clips, it's always a dude with a beer belly and a Tommy Bahama shirt filming it on his Galaxy 7.
Probably worse than ever because of the monetization and the combination of the monetization and the opacity surrounding monetization and surrounding identities and being able to track what's behind what. There are many accounts that are behind this, that are spreading misinformation around this, that were supposedly created a long time ago and then just scrubbed and renamed, and they've been spreading more misinformation around this, and that sort of thing.
Katie, let me ask you, what was the scale, from your vantage point, of the misinformation online? And from your vantage point also, how much has social media driven anti-immigrant sentiment, or fueled these demonstrations thus far?
Well, I think clearly it has played a role. It offers a space for the spreading of disinformation at great levels. It also gives an organizing space for these groups as well. So social media is important. But I think that there's a danger also in overemphasizing the role of social media in this, and detracting attention away from some of the issues that Shabna was raising around the role of politicians, political parties, traditional media as well. They've all played a role in creating this political atmosphere. So I think, yes, we can talk about the role of social media, but I think
I'm pausing right now. I want you to note the bottom chyron that says former English Defense League leader Tommy Robinson accused of stoking Southport riots. Tommy Robinson, who's like a white supremacist leader in the UK. Guess who had Tommy Robinson on his podcast? Guess. Come on, guys, guess in the chat. Do you know the answer to this, Henry?
Is it Joe Rogan?
No, even better. Think about this show.
Is it about Peterson?
Yep. Jordan Peterson had Tommy Robinson on his podcast to spout his shit. Okay? So we're talking about the English Defense League. If for any reason you're like, oh, is that just a group of mates and footballers who want to talk about the importance of defense in winning the Premier League championship? No, it's a bunch of white slobs who think they need to defend England from the migrants that are ruining their society. And Tommy Robinson, who's an absolute POS, is their leader. And Jordan Peterson featured him on his show, thought leader, Jordan Peterson. So just had to point that out.
That we need to look at this in a more rounded fashion, and the kinds of narratives that are being put forward by those who we see on television screens, in the newspapers, and the way that they're talking about these issues as well.
Let me ask you more about that. I mean, how much has the way that migration is discussed in media outlets throughout the government, how much has that changed in recent years?
Well, I mean,
someone said Wisecrack had Tommy Robinson on unsubscribe.
I mean, again, it's kind of touching on similar points to what Shabna was saying. There has been this escalation around it. And we've seen in the case here, for instance, when they were talking about the perpetrator of the attack, the BBC referred to him as born in Wales to Rwandan parents. Now, what's the purpose of referring to his lineage other than to feed into this kind of...
That feels like a good point, because there's lots of people in the UK who were probably born to like Scottish, Irish, Australian, American parents, and I don't think they would mention that. Just saying.
Narrative as well. So we do need to look at the traditional media and political parties, our government as well, and their role.
Shabna, I saw you reacting just now to what Katie was saying. Looked like you wanted to add to that. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think we're often led to believe this idea that it's a bottom-up process, that politicians are reacting to kind of legitimate grievances and kind of this idea of populist concerns that are rising naturally and organically. But actually, what we do know is that, exactly as Katie just described, the traditional media, our mainstream politicians, are actively responsible for crafting and mediating the messaging on this. And where they have been on this particular incident, but more broadly, how they have talked about immigration, how they have talked about Muslims, has created the perfect fertile ecosystem for all of this violence to occur. So,
and even the fear of Muslim thing makes me think, fear of Muslims thing. There was, Donald Trump has been tweeting and talking recently about the communist Democrats, and he's recently started making sure whenever he talks about Obama, he says, Barack Hussein Obama, trying to like dog whistle to a certain type of group. And this is a more minor thing, but I've been thinking about people like James Lindsay, and we talked about this a couple of weeks ago, the obsession with trying to say that like Kamala Harris is a secret Marxist or whatever. But there's again these dominoes that fall where there's people with a certain set of anxieties who are told that there's politicians, normally people who are of color or women, that have some radical ideology and they're going to take everything from them and da-da-da-da-da. Like everyone, they all know what they're doing. They all know what they're doing, These UK politicians, they know what they're doing.
When politicians turn around and talk about being surprised and shocked at the violence, and incidentally, but really importantly, not being able to call it out for being racist rioting in any terms that I've seen so far, when they're expressing their...
And can we kick the one person out of the chat? T Trotter with the British flag, they should never have been here. They did not integrate. I mean, guys, let's do a little story time. Guys, England spent hundreds, thousands, hundreds of years going around the world. And Trevor Noah has a good joke about this. I don't really like Trevor Noah, but he has a good joke about this. Goes around the world spreading the message of Britain, taking over other nations, flying their flag, imposing their language on other people. And then, when some people from those countries come back and are like, hey, saw your flag, made us learn your language, you heard about how great things are. So we're here now. Let's see what's up. Let's see how great this place is. You don't get to be mad at that. This idea that like a group of people owns a nation state is just like, wow. It's a really sad logic. And you know what, I'll say this for anyone, for the guy with the British flag in the chat who was like, oh, free UK, get out of here. It's not, they are integrate. It's not, get my country back. It's not for them. It's for us. Hey, oi, oi, oi. For that guy, you know, if you're still watching, I mean this very genuinely, migrants are not the reason that your life sucks. Migrants are not the reason that your economy is bad and your healthcare system is crumbling and your infrastructure is crumbling. And they're definitely not the reason that your country is very humid and damp. There are economic and political decisions that have been made for you, maybe by people you elected, maybe by people you didn't, who have created these conditions. I completely, to an extent, understand the psychology of wanting to scapegoat a group of people to cope with the fact that you are deeply and existentially depressed at the social and political and economic conditions in which you live. But you are not doing anything that's productive or helpful by blaming it on a group of other people and acting as if Britain would be better if a bunch of chubby white chuds were running the country and everyone else was gone. Just being honest with you there. So, you know, is what it is. Sorry that everyone had to hear that. Oh, the lore doc. Does the lore doc still exist? I'm gonna pull that up. And again, if you have
I'll pull that up.
Yeah.
Chat got
if anyone has
spicy
longer
for a moment
thoughts
there. That was fun. I'll be right back with some
Hey,
more.
why not? It was fuego. Let's get back to this video. And again, wisecracklive666@gmail.com if you have longer thoughts or questions on any of this. Shouts to our UK friends. And genuinely, like, besides the one guy who sucked, UK, British friends, let us know what you're thinking about this. You're on the ground. We're not.
Their sadness and their regrets and their tough action through policing on these issues. What they need to be aware of is their role, their responsibility, and their culpability in creating that perfect environment for this violence. And we're talking about levels of violence that we haven't seen on our streets in decades, the kind of violence that my parents would have been exposed to back in the 1960s and the 1970s, but which is now being plays out on streets, towns, cities across the UK. And that can't just be put down to misinformation in online spaces. We're talking about the politics that's coming out of the UK Parliament and which is being reported in our traditional and established media.
So, Han, I know that in this discussion we're going beyond just the misinformation that's being put out there on online platforms, but I do want to go back to it for a moment and ask you a couple of questions pertaining to that. First of all, are there concrete steps that can be taken to counteract this kind of misinformation that spreads so quickly? It spreads like wildfire online. And if so, what is it that can be done?
I really hope there's an answer to this, but I don't think there is. We made a couple of videos on this topic.
For one thing, more transparency, like preventing accounts from just being scrubbed without any tracing and being reused for propaganda.
Danger. Thank you so much.
Tactically, I guess it would be introducing some kind of friction, perhaps in collaboration with like crowdsourcing, fact checking, and just generally making sure.
And you know, I just want to say, Wonder Platypus, I hope the accent came from a spirit of love, you know?
That's something that is spreading too fast, has the brakes pulled on it a little bit, so that people who are interested in the truth can get to it before it starts getting into the monetization cycle of the far right.
So let me also ask you, how organized are the efforts of these far-right extremist groups? I mean, how centralized are they? And if most of this is being fueled online and through social media.
Alan Chung asked a really important question. I think the guy from London and MIT on the right has an upside-down couch behind him to create a black backdrop for the interview. I really think that's what it is. I've been thinking about it the whole time. I have the brain of a distracted child.
Media platforms. How difficult does that make it to track these kinds of groups and to track their activities?
Party tortoise, thank you so much.
It seems mostly leaderless. It's just kind of every person for themselves. As I said, the incentives are really good for getting people to just put out whatever catches the most eyeballs, gets the most attention. There is some possible evidence of collusion among accounts. There are some accounts that suspiciously retweet each other or repost each other at suspiciously close intervals. So there's some on some level there's some collaboration, but possibly even the same people doing it. But yeah, overall it's mostly leaderless. Yeah.
Katie, let me ask you to examine a different aspect of all this. I mean, has political leadership in the UK been leading, or has it been following a narrative shaped by this anti-immigrant faction that we've seen in politics and media?
Well, I think in all these questions, we have to think about the relative power that people have. So, you know, people in government have the power to shape narratives around these issues. And so when we look at this, often there's this idea that, you know, they're being led by popular sentiment. But actually, they're the ones who have the media access in a number of cases, and we've seen them push anti-immigration politics. So, for instance, there's work by my colleagues Aurelian Mondon and Aaron Winter, and they looked at people's perceptions around the issues that are most important to them in their day-to-day lives. And in day-to-day lives, immigration did not feature highly at all. They were asked the same question on the country level, and that's where immigration featured higher.
So the thing in Rwanda they're showing is where they're building the housing for the migrants they're shipping away from the UK, just so you have context for the B-roll that they're showing right there. I mean, you know, and I think Katie here is getting at it. You know, a lot of this stuff starts online. And the crazy thing, too, is like some of the motive for people spreading this stuff on the internet is clicks and money. They're literally monetizing this thing. You will notice that some of the craziest shit you see on Twitter is from blue check accounts. The blue check allows them to monetize what they're doing. On a side note, we won't get into this today, but Elon Musk and X are currently suing a group of companies for boycotting advertising on X because they didn't want to be on the Nazi platform. Guys, we gotta love this when free market, anti-government control, anti-communism, anti-socialism guys are just like, but the free market didn't make me money, so it's bad. Like, they're legit mad that companies are like, no, we want to advertise on you. That's how the market works, bub. Pick a team. If you want to be a market guy, be a market guy. If you don't. Can't have it both ways, kiddo. But yeah.
Now, where do people get these ideas from? If it doesn't affect you in your day-to-day life, then how are you getting this information? And that's where we need to look at political leaders, traditional media, to see their responsibility in normalizing this kind of exclusionary racist politics.
So, Katie, let me ask you then, I mean, what do you think are the steps that could be taken to actually start combating this?
Help us, Katie.
Well, obviously,
you're our only
that's
hope.
a very tough question, but I mean, I think a starting point is actually putting forward alternative narratives. We've seen that politicians are peddling the same kinds of anti-Muslim, anti-immigration, racist narratives.
I'm going to pause here, and maybe we actually stop this video here because I want to get to this article. But I mean, I have a question, a general question for you in the chat, for Henry, for God, if you exist. But like, I wonder what a viable counter to this is, because, you know, thank you so much, Blue Deck. You know, because what we see, of course, is these angry narratives that emerge on social media that tie things happening to Muslims, to migrants, to the other. Mark Nugent, that was funny. To all these sorts of things, you know, that anger spreads quickly. People repost it, they react to it. How convincing would it be for a politician to try to explain a counter narrative? You know. Because I worry that would be hard. Like, because we could sit here and we could talk about how there are real clear economic and social reasons that have led to the degradation and the collapse of British society and the society of other places in the West that disconnect that from these narratives. Jeffrey Epstein is in the chat, and Jeffrey Epstein said miserable people are easily manipulated. I didn't think I'd say this today, but you're right, Jeffrey Epstein. But is it, I don't know. I guess I would say I feel, unfortunately, cynical about an ability to counter anger-based propaganda and misinformation. What do you think, Henry?
I think the only way for like somebody to trust a politician or figure in a leadership or authority position to like disprove these sort of feelings would have to be somebody who is delivering like in a material way, like giving them money or jobs or like actual visible infrastructure improvement and like improvements to their safety. Because yeah, when they're in that anxious emotional fear state, and it's very clear that like your politicians are just kind of pitching things down the road for the sake of their own career, like I don't think that you have the prerequisite trust. Like I really do think like it takes more than just like being able to like talk to these people to get them to defuse their anger. That's also kind of why like I don't know, to an extent, maybe on the ground conversion of people on an individual level doesn't work as well without, again, infrastructure, something to actually alleviate their anxieties about not making it to tomorrow.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and Zenith here says the press in the UK is a big problem. Jeremy Corbyn tried to counter a narrative and they decimated him. I mean, yeah, similar to when we had Bernie Sanders running in 2020 in America, he tried to very clearly identify, like the whole Bernie Sanders campaign was basically like the reason that your life is bad and sucks is because of these economic and social conditions. That's why he always said the millionaires and the billionaires on Wall Street.
Mm-hmm.
But he pointed to them, like in the same way that others point to the migrant. Someone like Sanders pointed to where it was. He was literally saying, it's these guys over here. They're doing it to you. And he tried to make it very clear.
Right.
And then they took him out. We have a little bit of time left. I'll have to get off when my daughter's babysitter gets here.
Okay.
Shouts to my daughter's babysitter. She's cool.
I do want to bring up that Sanders also
Okay.
did have the phrasing, universal jobs program and
Yeah.
Medicare for all, like very, very clear, tangible, like, okay, yeah, that's a policy idea.
100%. So I posted a link in the chat. We're going to look at this article on Defector. It might work for you. It might get paywalled. I'm not sure. And it's from Tom Wyman. Tom is a philosopher based in the UK. He's written some videos for us. He's written some great books. He wrote an introduction to one of Marx's work. He wrote a book on why philosophically you can justify having kids. I think it's called Infinitely Full of Hope. If any of my fellow parents out there, it's really worth checking out. But he wrote, this came out today. So let's just start from the top here. Maybe read most of it. But he says, the other day I was riding a bus through one of the most depressed parts of the northern English urban aggregation where I live, on my way to an Anglo-Saxon themed farm park adjacent to an historically important former monastery. He's getting after it. In the 8th century, this is one of Europe's most vital centers of learning. Now, it's next to a bus stop called High Street on a mostly derelict industrial estate, adjacent to a town where the only shop I could see open from the bus was a place called Espresso Slots. Yeah, I mean, in a lot of towns in the UK, guys, I'm being real with you, they're depressing. It's kind of like a vibe that maybe we would associate with like Appalachia in America. It's for a long time now, at least since the Tories rose to power in 2010, we've had a government fundamentally hostile to life as it was once carried out in these places. And this is clutch. This is what we're talking about. A government that is systematically disinvested from communities like this and allowed them to die. In 2019, a UN report on the economic damage caused by the Tories' economic austerity program, again, this is a UN report on conditions in England, noted that life expectancy in the north of England had fallen at the sort of rate one would normally expect to observe on the losing side of a civil war. That is how much they've devastated the baseline conditions for life in the UK via austerity. And austerity, in case you don't know, it's like a cutting government spending, but austerity normally looks like taking away social services that help people at the bottom. It says a brief enthusiasm for leveling up the North turned out to be a little more than a gimmicky way of doling out money to places that voted Tory. Britain is bleak, and it's only likely to get worse. Next paragraph says, given all this, it seems remarkable that anyone would still want to come to the UK to start a new life at all, to work, to study, to raise children. This is the thing I would get asked sometimes, and now it makes more sense to me. When I lived in the UK, people were like, why do you want to live here? This is something I found myself asking people who aren't originally from here. Tom goes on and says, we have European-style taxes and American-style public services. Salaries have largely stagnated, and the cost of living keeps rising. People famously do not come here for the weather. And then he gives an anecdote about how a colleague told him that he was there because at least he didn't have to worry about school shootings. He says, but we need people to keep wanting to come here. The higher education sector is completely reliant on foreign students. It says all of the economic growth in the country since 2010 has been driven by immigration. And this is, of course, the paradox of places like the UK and America. Economic growth, job stability, so many things are fundamentally tied to immigration, and yet we've made immigrants the bad guy. But maybe the systematic encrappening of the country is the point. Despite the many advantages that immigration brings, I like this, not just economic strength, but also a serviceable cuisine. British food, not very good. The British political mainstream has long been united on 2 points. There are too many immigrants, and there are too many Muslims. Different sides of the political spectrum will express the point in different ways. He says, Reform UK leader Nigel Farage, and Farage is like a kind of alt-right Trumpy guy, might state them openly, while a Labour politician, which is their Liberal Party, might talk about the need to manage immigration and encourage integration. But in the mainstream British politics, Enoch Powell's views have become axiomatic. The point of any immigration policy is to limit it, to stop them from getting in, and to stop our systematically defunded services from being overwhelmed. So here's the problem too. It could be the case that public services get overwhelmed and I'm saying it could here, by migrants. But why are they overwhelmed? Oh yeah, because they've been systematically defunded. Did the migrants defund public services? I don't know. He goes on and says, but the more mainstream politicians tell racists in this country that they're right about everything, the angrier the racists seem to get about it. Of course, it doesn't help that the media has been gleefully stoking these fires for years. No matter how much of our nose the powers that might be try to cut off despite our collective face, no destruction or decline seems to go hard enough or fast enough to satisfy the brain Nazi mob. And that's where the country is now. Outbreaks of far-right violence spreading across the country faster than a health secretary rushing to ban treatment for trans teenagers. People of Britain want their country back, presumably so they can set even more of it on fire. And it does feel like that. There's this sense in which people want it back just to burn the whole thing to the ground, man. It's tough. Again, this is an article by Tom Wyman in Defector. If you got the money to it, Defector's a great publication. It's a crowd-funded publication that covers sports, but then they cover stuff like this because someone has to. It was written by Tom Wyman again. So, this next paragraph, he just summarizes a lot of what we saw in those news clips about sort of like what happened. He does say this is something, he brings up that they surrounded hotels thought to be housing asylum seekers and set them on fire. This is something that can only really be called a pogrom. It's really important to think about that, guys. People surrounded hotels that they knew there were human beings in, but because they assumed these human beings were asylum seekers and or brown, they were comfortable setting the building on fire, knowing that a consequence of that could be burning people to death. It's where we're at. He says, Tom goes on to say, the violence is all terrifying enough already, but what I find particularly frightening is I can't imagine where this is going to end. I feel deeply concerned for my own community, which is made livable in part because of the vibrant, friendly Kurdish community that also makes it their home. Politicians have condemned the violence, and there is talk of stepping up the policing, of fast-tracking the sentencing, of making an example of the protesters. Some have suggested sending in the army. But these condemnations have felt, at best, mealy-mouthed. All the mainstream British politicians can do in retaliation to these riots is condemn how the rioters are expressing their views. Skipping down a little bit, he says, even if the violence is eventually contained, life in this country will only get harder for immigrants from here. And the political establishment will surely find a way to give the far right more of what they want. The actual solution is a politician willing to voice perhaps the greatest taboo in British political life, that immigration is a good thing that should be celebrated. That makes us better, that it's good for our children to attend schools with people who speak other languages at home. He says, skipping ahead, he says, this politician would declare their commitment to an immigration policy with a goal to attract more immigrants, to help people to come and make their lives here, to bring life back to our dying, neglected places. Either that, or we just give in to this country's cruelest instincts, letting the government slash and cut while the far right burns and smashes. There's nothing left to lose but our espresso slots. Nice little shout out reference to Marx there. So great stuff. But yeah, guys, a very, very good piece by Tom there, kind of explaining it. And I think getting at that sort of hopelessness that a lot of people in the UK might feel, because what is the end game of all of this? Where does this all go? And again, someone brings this up in the chat. This is a slight digression, but it says that he brings up that the JD Vance couch thing is fake. Yeah, at least it's a fun fake thing. I'm more comfortable, and I'm slightly embarrassed for getting caught up in that, but as was his penis. But I'm slightly embarrassed for getting caught up in that disinformation, but at least it's relatively harmful or harmless. Oops. But, there you go. But I think, I started today. I don't know about you guys. I started today's stream not really understanding much of what was going on in the UK. I think we both get how, kind of where this stuff came from, what the roots of a lot of this are. And I think for a lot of us, we can see how, even if, we're not in the UK, that there are similar things happening where we all live, right? I know in the States right now, we can absolutely see, one of the main talking points of the Trump campaign in this election cycle is immigrants. And immigrants are murderers, and they're taking our jobs, and they're bad, and they're often brown, and hey, also sometimes they're Muslim. And, all the same rhetoric is there. And it's just a question of what's the end game of all of this stuff. Heavy one today, I know. We were going to get into the academic freedom in Florida thing. Something that you guys can look into on your own. I'll drop a quick little link here just so you have it in case anyone's like, oh, what's going on over there? But the Just There's in public universities in Florida now. If you have a course, they can basically comb through your learning materials to make sure it's not anti-Semitic. Of course, anti-Semitism, bad. You shouldn't teach anti-Semitic things. I hope that is assumed. But it's largely being used as a smokescreen to monitor academic curriculums and make sure people aren't teaching things that are all critical of Israel, which is not the best. Got a really great email from one of our main friends of the show. I want to get into next show because it asked a really important and serious question. And Sean, thank you for sending that. I want to make sure we look at that next stream. If anyone has thoughts on any of this, and if you watch this later and you're not here live, very curious what you think. Very curious about what people in the UK think about all of this. You can hit us up at wisecracklive666@gmail.com. You can leave a comment on the stream. We read those. We check them out. Something we talked about last week too is, or yesterday is, let us know what you want to talk about in the stream. Hit us up, okay? Some of you are on our Discord server. You get on our Discord server via Patreon. So for our patrons, please do drop in the Wisecrack Live section of our Discord server and let us know what you think, what you want us to cover, questions you have, videos you like, all that stuff. I got another video sent today that looked really interesting. It was just really long, so we might look into that later. If you're not on our Discord, which is fine, you can email us at wisecracklive666. You can hit me up on Twitter at Michael O'Burns. Hit Wisecrack up on Twitter at Wisecrack. It's Twitter, it's not X. So we want you to be a part of this. Final shout out to our coffee partner. Yes, Please Coffee. It's almost empty because it's so good. I'm drinking it all. Head over to Yes Please. You get 20% off coffee. It's very good. Thanks for hanging today. I know we got really into it today, but I think that it's important that we understand this stuff. Important we get our head around it because sometimes it's coming for us. We'll be back Monday. We'll try to have a fun time. Ooh, Wisconsin rally. I want to know about that. Okay, but shouts to producer Henry. And again, Kyle Brittenhouse, guys. Kyle Brittenhouse. Henry did that. It's 666 right now, so let's end on an evil note. We'll see you guys Monday. This is Wisecrack Live. Have a great week.
Have a happy weekend, y'all. See you next week.